We're going to take a look today at specialised cells, and you should have your booklet open at page 9. Last week we spent a bit of time looking at typical animal and plant cells. You can see an example of a diagram here on the screen. And the cells that we learned were just a typical animal and plant cells. But what we find is that within animals and within plants, there are different types of cells that have a particular purpose, a particular job, a particular role in that different organism, so be that an animal or a plant. And those are what we call specialised cells. And they have the same general structure as the cells pictured here, but their structure might look slightly different or have a slightly different feature or adaptation to help them do their job. So specialised cells are cells which have a structure that is adapted for its function. In other words, they're going to look slightly different than the typical animal and plant cell that we learned. And that's because they have a slight structural adaptation that will help them do its job, help them in their role in the plant or the animal. So we can see some diagrams of some specialised cells here. I wonder, can you recognise any of these cells? On the very left, we have something called a ciliated epithelium cell, which we're going to look at more closely in just a second. What do you think the next one down is? It's a red blood cell, so it's quite different in that it has no nucleus and it has that dipped surface so that it can carry oxygen around the body. In the bottom left, we have what we call a palisade or a leaf cell, and you can see that it's packed full of chloroplasts that we were looking at last week so that it can trap lots of light for photosynthesis. Up in the top right hand corner then, what do you think we have there? That is what we call a nerve cell. So it's found in animals and it's used to carry signals around our body, from our brain to our different organs. It carries the electrical signals to tell the different parts of your body what to do. So for example, if you want to wiggle your fingers, it's nerve cells that carry the signal from your brain all the way to your fingers to tell your fingers to move. What do you think the next one down on the right is? That is what we call a sperm cell. And that's really important in fertilisation, which we'll look at a bit more closely next week. During fertilisation, sperm cell will join with the egg cell to make a new living organism. Just beside it on the left is an ovum or an egg cell, which again the sperm cell will combine with during fertilisation to make a new living organism. So that's an ovum or an egg cell. That is found in the female of animals, and the sperm cell is found in the males. And then finally in the bottom right hand corner you have what we call a root hair cell. Looks a bit of a funny one. It's found in plants as well. And you can see the vacuole in the centre, which would suggest that it was a plant cell because animal cells do not have a vacuole. But you can see that it has no chloroplasts, and that's because it's underground. And you can see that long projection. That means that it can absorb lots of water for the plant. But we'll look at it again on page 9. So over on page 9, we're going to look at 3 particular specialised cells that you need to learn in good detail. You need to learn their job and you need to learn how they are specialised for the job that they do. In other words, what adaptation do they have? How are they different than your typical animal and plant cell in order to help them to do their job? So you might want to take a slightly bigger title on this page of specialised cells just to make that stand out. And let's look at each one of these 3 cells in turn. So the first cell that we have is the sperm cell, and that is found in animals. And the job of the sperm cell is to swim to the egg and to fertilise an egg and to pass on the genetic information. So that's what happens when fertilisation takes place. When the egg joins with the sperm, they form what we call a zygote, and that's the first stage of fertilisation, is when those 2 cells join together. And it's actually the nucleus of the sperm joining with the nucleus of the egg. Again, we'll look at that next week, but the job of the sperm is to swim to the egg and to fertilise it and to pass on the genetic information. So that's its job. And how it's adapted to do that, how it's specialised to do that, is that it has this long tail to help it swim to the egg. So if you were asked how is it specialised, what adaptation it has, you would say that it has a tail to help it swim to the egg. So you might want to add that to your notes. So the job is swim to the egg, to fertilise it, to pass on the genetic information. How it's specialised is that it's got this tail to help it swim. So the information in that box is really key for you to learn. Let's have a look at the next specialised cell that you need to know in particular, and that's called the ciliated epithelium cell, and that is a hard one to learn, so please spend a bit of time in learning, particularly that spelling, ciliated epithelium cell. I would maybe try and write that out a few times. That again is an animal cell, so notice no vacuole or chloroplast or things like that. The job of the ciliated epithelium cell is to move dust up from the lungs and move them out when you essentially cough. You can see that on the top of the cell they have these tiny hairs, and those hairs are called cilia. So those are tiny hairs that will kind of waft back and forwards to bring up dust from your lungs into the throat, combine it with mucus, and then you'll be able to cough it up. Okay, so again, the job of the ciliated epithelium cell is to keep essentially your airways nice and clean, nice and free of dust. And how it's specialised for that job is these little cilia, these hairs that can move and waft up dust into the throat, combine it with mucus, and you can then cough it out. So again, you might want to add to your notes that it is the cilia that is makes it specialised. You can see other than that, it looks like a fairly standard animal cell. You're told in the box to label the cell, so try and label as much of it as you can. What structures can you see in this cell? So think about what is in an animal cell and see if you can label it. Maybe pause the video and give that a go yourself. So the four main parts of an animal cell are the nucleus, the cell membrane, the cytoplasm, and the nuclear membrane, which goes around the nucleus. Remember that that's called a nuclear membrane, not a nucleus membrane, which a lot of you wrote in your little quiz last week. So again, job of the ciliated epithelium cell is to waft up dust from the lungs to keep your airway nice and clear. How it's specialised is those little cilia, the hairs. And then finally, we have a diagram at the bottom, which is our last specialised cell for us to look at. And this is called a root hair cell, and it is found in plants. So this would not be found in animals. Okay, so this is not like the roots of your hair or anything like that. It's nothing to do with that. These are the little hair cells that are on the surface of roots in plants. So you can see that it's different from your typical plant cell in a couple of different ways. First of all, it has this long projection and this long sticky outy bit that does what we call increase the surface area. In other words, it gives it a larger surface so that it can absorb more water. The other thing with root hair cells are that the cell walls are very thin, again to allow as much water to be absorbed as possible. So you might want to add those two things to your diagram, the long projection, the long sticky outy bit, but don't call it a sticky outy bit in a test, that doesn't sound too scientific. That gives it a large surface area for absorbing water and minerals. Minerals are just different things in the soil that will help a plant grow, like nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus are needed for healthy plant growth. So that's absorbed through the root hair cells as well. And also it has a thin wall to help absorb water and minerals as well. You're also told in the box to draw on the vacuole and the nucleus in the correct place. So let's do that now. So the first thing I've drawn there is the vacuole. So that goes on the inside of the cell, inside the cell membrane as such, and label that the vacuole, vacuole. Be careful about your spelling there. I've just changed that slightly as my U looked a bit like a V, so VACUOLE. And then your nucleus is outside the vacuole, but within the cell membrane, so inside the cell still. So label that as well. That's the nucleus, NUCLEUS. So on this page are 3 different specialised cells. And you need to learn these 3 in particular. So the sperm cell, the ciliated epithelium cell, and the root hair cell. So for each of these 3 cells, you need to know its function, in other words, its job, and also how it is specialised or adapted to help it with that job. So make sure you spend a bit of time learning the 3 of these cells. What I want you to do is pause this video and watch the other YouTube video that I sent you. It's just a short 3-minute summary on some other examples of specialised cells. It goes quite quickly, so try and take in as much as you can. And then I want you to come back to this video because we're going to have a wee look at some questions and some activities on these specialised cells. So pause this video, maybe open up the other YouTube video in a different tab on your iPad so that you can come straight back to this point in this video. So now that you have watched that video of the summary of specialised cells, I would like you to do a couple of activities on specialised cells. So the first one, what I would like you to do is I need you to take a blank page in your booklet or a file page if you can't find a blank page in your booklet. And I'd like you to take a title of specialised cells. What I'd then like you to do is write the numbers 1 to 7 down the side of the page. And then on the next few slides, you're going to see a picture of a specialised cells. And these are going to be real pictures of, say, for example, microscope slides of these specialised cells. So they're photographs of microscope slides or pictures of these cells in real life. Sometimes they're a little bit trickier to identify, but I want you to just give this a go. This is a little fun activity, so don't worry if you don't get them right. So there's going to be 7 in total. For each of the pictures that come up, write down the name of the specialised cell, and if you're not sure, take a guess. So if you're not quite ready, pause this video now because we're about to go on to the first picture. And what I want you to do is to just write down what you think it is. So here is number 1, and there's actually 2 cells in this diagram, 2 specialised cells. So this is the first one, and this is the second one. So for number 1, you could write down something and something. So give that a go. What do you think these are? Here is number 2. So if you weren't quite finished with number 1, you can go back and pause the video while you do this. So here is number 2. What do you think this is? What type of specialised cell? Here's number 3. So again, this is a picture of a specialised cell. What specialised cell do you think this is? Here's number 4, and again, if you didn't get time for any of those last ones, please go back to them and pause the video while you work out what it is and write it down. But here's number 4. What specialised cell do you think this is a picture of? Here's number 5. What specialised cell do you think this is? Here's number 6. What specialised cell do you think this is? And finally, here is number 7. So here's another picture of some specialised cells. What specialised cells do you think these are? Okay, so I'm about to go through the answers, so if you haven't got any of them, maybe pause the video and scroll it back to see if you can get any of the ones that you're missing. So if you haven't finished yet, please pause the video now because I'm about to go through the answers. So what I'd like you to do now is to mark your answers in a different coloured pen and to correct your answers if you didn't get the right answer. So let's have a look at number 1. What did you think it was? Here we had some pictures of some blood cells. So on the left we have a red blood cell, on the right we have a white blood cell. So your answer for number 1 should have been red blood cell and white blood cell. Number 2 was an egg cell, or you could have called it an ovum. And this is actually an egg cell surrounded by lots and lots of sperm cells. So you can see the sperm cells in there. You know, there's a couple that are quite clear here. You can see the head of the sperm cell and the long tails. So it's actually an egg cell surrounded by lots of sperm cell. But as long as you wrote egg cell or ovum for this one, that was correct. Number 3 then, what did you think these were? Well, these are actually the cilia of a ciliated epithelium cell. So those little hair-like projections there are the cilia of a ciliated epithelium cell. Number 4 is a picture of a nerve cell, so you can see the projections from that as well that help carry the signals of from the nerve cell. So number 4 is a picture of a nerve cell. Number 5 should have been a palisade or a leaf cell. You can describe it as either. You can see these cells are packed full of chloroplasts, and that is because they need to trap light for photosynthesis. Number 6 is a root hair cell, and I should have said at the time back in our diagram on page 9, if you have a wee look at it, root hair cells don't have any chloroplasts, but that is because they are underground, so they won't be trapping any sunlight because they're underground in the soil, and so therefore they don't need chloroplasts because they're not going to be trapping sunlight. That happens in the leaves of plants. But here, number 6 is a picture of a root hair cell. And finally, number 7, you can see we have a picture of some sperm cells. So you can see the head there and the long thin tails to help them swim to the egg cells. So hopefully you were able to identify most of those specialised cells. So this is the second and last activity that I want you to do on specialised cells. So what I've got here on the screen are 8 questions which I would like you to answer. So you can continue working on the same page that you were identifying the pictures of the cells on, and that's absolutely fine. Maybe take a little subtitle of questions. So that's just on your same file page or the blank page in your booklet that you're working on. So just continue on in the same page. I'd like you to answer these questions in full sentences. So I'll explain what I mean by that in just a second. You can use page 9 of your notes to help you. That will cover your sperm cell, ciliated epithelium cell and root hair cell. But there are questions on other specialised cells, so you might need to go back to the other YouTube video to help you with that. So again, if you have that open in a separate tab, you can scroll through that and go to the different sections on the different specialised cells if you need a little recap on some of these questions. But they're just 8 simple questions here. I don't need super long answers, but I do want them in full sentences so that you can look back and sort of learn from these questions, learn from your answers to these questions. So for example, number 1 is, why are nerve cells so long? So your answer would be, nerve cells are so long to or because ... Okay, and why they are so long. So writing in full sentences essentially means writing it in a way that you could almost work out what the question was in the first place, so that you can look back and actually learn from your answers. Because if you just write the final answer, then that won't help very much. Okay, so you may need to go back to the video, you may need to go back to page 9 of your notes, but I want you to give a go at answering these questions. So what you can do, one of 2 things, is you can pause the video now and just leave these questions on your screen and write the answers down to them. That's what I would suggest. or I've also uploaded them in the files section of your Teams page if you would prefer maybe to print them out and work from that. It's absolutely up to you. But if you're working from the screen, please pause the video now and answer these questions. And then there is one last thing that I want you to do after that, so don't forget to watch the very end of the video. So pause the video now and answer these questions. So at this stage of the video, you should have completed page 9 of your notes and added some extra labels. You should have completed the 2 Specialised Cells activities. And the very last thing I want you to do today is answer the questions on page 10. So what you have at the top of page 10 is a reminder of what we were looking at last week, in that cells of the same type work together to make up what we call a tissue. Tissues work together to form what we call organs, and different organs work together to form different organ systems, which then make up your organism, like us humans. Okay, so we have cells working together to form tissues, tissues working together to form organs, and organs working together to form our overall organism. Then what you have underneath this diagram are 6 simple questions which I would like you to answer. Now it's up to you what you would like to do. Either you can answer them just on the page. If you can squeeze them in just below the question, that's absolutely fine. Or what you can do is take a new page, or if you have room on the back of your file page that you've worked on, please do that. But if you do choose to answer them on a file page, then please just make a wee note on this page. And just make a note that your answers are on a file page so you know where to find that. But if you can squeeze them in underneath the questions, I have no problem with you doing that. They're not overly long questions, so you might be able to even fit some of them in beside the question. So this time you don't have to answer in full questions or full sentences, sorry. Just a short answer is absolutely fine. So 6 simple questions just to finish off this lesson. Thank you for your work, girls.